Welcome, everybody out there to Divorce Recovery Men Over 40 Number 6 podcast. We have Rolland Sarver on the mic. And Rolland wrote a book, The Value Message, and it talks about celebrating your value, uncovering your gift and potential. So he's going to talk to us about that and using that within the divorce space, the divorce recovery space, and go from there. So Rolland, take it.
All right. Thanks, David. It's great to be on your podcast. The book, The Value Message, I feel like I was inspired to write it. It published in September of 22, and I feel like I've always wanted to help people see their value, and somehow that's how that come about. And just like a person's soul value, different than how culture and society see it, and our own minds tend to undermine it. And my audience has kind of evolved, and I wanted to touch people that struggled with seeing their value and worth, which ends up probably being most of us. But It's just been interesting to reach and touch people's lives who suffer from maybe just different struggles that you wouldn't think of. But when the conversation comes up, you get talking a little bit deeper to people. And I was thinking of children, really. They started me off on this journey. And, a child's born into the world and everybody understands the value of that child. But then when does that change? Is it in the rebellious teenage years, or when their parents themselves, or maybe even older, feel like they don't feel as useful of a place in society? But there's a value people have that never changes. And so I just started thinking about that. Pretty much that's how the book come about, and it's been some great conversations with people. It's been an interesting journey. But one of the reasons that I really like to help people see their value, and different than me just telling you about your value, but when people can really see it for themselves, and that's what changes the game. And I studied life coaching a little bit too, and I like that, because it's setting goals. It's the one-on-one connection with people. Somebody's got your back, and you're working with people again. But I think the reason I just lean toward helping people see their value is because no matter what the next step is, you're going to be in a better place to take it. And the next step, it can be challenges like going through a divorce, or maybe there's financial issues, or just relationship family issues, or a struggle with a job, or transition. So that's why I feel like helping people see their value, that whatever that next step is, you're going to be prepared for it.
So when you talk about, one of the things you talked about in the book and also in your listing, you talk about self-care. And that's one of the things that we stress in the other podcasts. And a lot of people don't stress that more. And Rachel and I talk about, when the plane's going down and the oxygen masks come out, they tell you to put yours on first, then you put your kids on, because you can't take care of your kids if you can't take care of yourself.
That's so true. And that illustration is fantastic about the airplane. And I think probably culture-wise too, we're just geared to take care of other people first. And like we sort of see a humility side to thinking of other people's needs before ourselves. But somehow that's a little bit backwards. And I think I picked up some tips along that line when I was on the fire department as well. And it's kind of the mask thing, but like even showing up on scene or getting to the fire department in your vehicle, that, hey, if you're not careful, if you don't have your lights on, if you don't take time to think and be smart, you're not going to be in a position to help somebody that needs it at the time. And I feel like that's what self-care is about, is just being able to show up, be present in your best self, and finding yourself in a place and helping yourself get to that place where you can be of service to other people.
So you talk about helping others find their value, and you don't want to show them their value. So how do you not cross that line? How do you keep it almost like third person?
Yeah. So, that's interesting. That's a great question, because I like to tell people about their value and just kind of like it's almost a language to learn, but which is super beneficial. And here's a quote that I lean on a lot. I think it explains that is that when other people see your value, you're advantaged, but when you see your value, you're unshakable. And it kind of ties into self-love and care about yourself and other people too, I feel like, because if some of us may have grown up in an environment where we felt our value, and we're advantaged because of that. But what happens if you get out in a space and that's not true, or you're among people that don't appreciate you? So then where that leaves you is that's why when we see our own value, we can't be shaken out of that tree. And that's why I think about self-care, as I mentioned, along that line too. Like, what if you come up in an environment where people aren't caring for you, or even we aren't caring for ourselves? There's no forward motion that goes with that. And I use an illustration actually that it's just really simple. It's like a doctor's pain scale, and it's been a great springboard for conversation. So like a pain scale is the least is 1 and the most is a 10. So just to sit around and ask people, hey, where do you feel like on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you feel like you're at with your value, and how you see your value, or how other people see your real soul value? And it could be like I say, hey, if I spill coffee on my wife's computer, I might think, well, I'm probably at a 4 or 5. Or somebody that's depending on how expensive the computer is, but somebody that maybe we see somebody as arrogant, they might think they're 8 or 9 on this 1 to 10 scale. Well, maybe they feel they're 4 or 5, but they want you to see them as a 8 or 9.
Yep.
And so it's just a great conversation to be aware of how we perceive our value. And so sometimes we talk with people who really struggle, like even in mental health. Some people, maybe they struggle with suicidal ideation and more serious subjects along that line. They might feel like they're a 1 or a 2, So my favorite part of that presentation is telling people that hey, I've got some really good news for you, because you're a 10. And I'm a 10, and that other person's a 10, and we're actually all a 10 because our value doesn't change. And that's exactly where it is at. But the perception is we don't see ourselves that way. It's easy to see other people. Oh yeah, everybody else in this room is a 10, but I'm a 6. Yep. So just walking people through that conversation to help them to see their self as that 10. If you come into the room and you see yourself as an 8 or a 7, and you go out of the room as a 10, you're going to be a different person, because there's so many things that change when we perceive and see our own value.
What I hear you're saying, there's like a good versus evil between the way you perceive yourself and perfection.
Yes. Yep.
How does that fight happen? And when do you sit back and, yeah.
Let me throw this in there too, because there's another part to that I call a 2-box illustration, and it helps people. I feel like it helps them separate this real true value from how society sees it, or how our minds see it. In that, for example, like our skill sets is different than our real actual value. So sometimes we get that confused. We think, well, if I'm able, if I'm capable, if I do everything perfect, if I do everything just right, and I've got skills, then I'm valuable, which there's like a sense of truth to that, but that's different than that soul value we're talking about. And I think that gets confusing for people because those things are not separated. So we strive and try and climb and compete just to substantiate our value to ourselves or to other people. But this is how I separate it. I say everybody has a box, and I call it the value box. So if we just like symbolize our value, it's like a little shoe box, and I hope this makes sense. And so if you can just picture in your mind a little shoe box, and everybody has a box exactly like that. There's no difference. And that box represents everything about our real, true, this soul value. But the other box is our ego box. And I call it the ego box, but it has everything to do with our persona, like maybe our gender or our skill sets or our preferences or our knowledge or our lack of knowledge. And it's that box. That box pertains to everything about ourselves, like I said, our skill set. So let's separate that. Because, for example, I use this illustration. I'm a runner, and I fall and break my leg. Oh no, I can't compete. I'm not what I once was. I'm ruined. I'm worthless. Well, hold on. Wait a minute now. Your ego box just broke its leg, and yeah, it's going to be inconvenient, but your value box has not changed at all. And Dave, so this is what I say, like, there's so many things about that ego box that are unpredictable and that can change. Like, for example, our ego box, maybe we're going through that divorce, or we're having financial issues, or we're struggling somehow mentally, or we've been abused, and there's some trauma there. That's all in the ego box. Your value box hasn't changed at all. And I just love that theme to illustrate that with people, because here I'm suffering, and I feel like maybe I'm not what I once was, or I'm struggling with that value, the feeling and sense of value, because I'm tying it to the ego box. But the clarity of that, hey, there's something about me, there's a part of me that can't be touched or can't be damaged or can't be destroyed. And I think that just brings hope to people in their situation, because, hey, it can be different, and I can see things different. And if I just feel like that about people, like if we can see our value and focus on that, and we're not struggling with that, we got real clarity about that, then we're going to have energy. We're going to have that. We can take that energy. We've been struggling with that problem. We can focus that energy on something else. Like maybe it's just being more self-aware or self-care, and just to be able to, does that make sense? Like to spend that energy somewhere where we can get more forward motion, serve people better, understand ourselves more, understand other people better.
Maybe like take that energy that you have against your soon-to-be ex-wife and turn that toward taking the kids out or playing with the kids or something like that. So which is one of my biggest questions, how does which box does getting out of your comfort zone deal with? The value box or the ego box?
That's a good question. The ego box. I'd say, like, just thinking that through.
Yeah.
What's that?
Or is it a separate box? Getting out of your comfort zone box.
I could see, like, getting out of our comfort zone and personal development being wrapped up in the ego box. Maybe like a skill set. Because so that's an interesting question, because, like, for me, I feel like growth never comes unless we get out of that comfort zone. And getting out of that comfort zone, obviously, is there's going to be some pain and difficulty that goes with that. But with that, growth comes. And, like you're talking about that energy to, hey, listen, there's conflict. Let's do something with forward motion. Let's do something like with the kids, or something that can, like we can attach progress to, we can spend energy on. And the other thing I think about too is communication. That's maybe a part of personal growth, because I feel like communication, for one thing, is very poorly modeled in society and culture, just by default. And there's two authors that have helped me tremendously. And one was William Glasser. I come across him about 20 years ago or more. And just full disclosure, when I was in my late teens, I had a lot of struggles in the mental health arena. and a lot of difficulties, relationship issues. And so anyway, I come across this author about 5 or 6 years later, and he helped me with two things. He helped me see the importance of relationships, but he introduced me to the thought of the toolbox thing, that we hear about. And he said, anyway, he illustrated it this way. There's two toolboxes, and the one was just skills to improve relationships, and the other was skills to get rid of that didn't improve relationships. And I never had heard anything about that before. And I thought that the power of that in relationships and improving relationships, those things really, they don't show up in culture. Like, where do you take that class in school? How to relate better with people. But yet it's super important. And I feel like that value thing, again, if we can free up energy and get away from that struggle, then we can focus more on self-awareness and personal development and
So then
learning how
the
to.
toolbox or the two toolboxes would deal with the ego then.
Yes. Yeah.
Would be your ability to have a good conversation or meaningful conversations with other people.
Yes. Yeah, that's so true. And I didn't, until I really looked at that, like in myself, some of those, I'll call them the negative behaviors, like judging, nagging, rewarding to control, criticizing, blaming, complaining, and punishment. I just wrote them down here. It's like those things were so in me by nature and also modeled in society pretty much. But myself, I can speak for myself, I use those tools, even though they were ineffective and didn't help me foster better relationships. That's the tools I had to work with. And so I feel like a lot of times that just seems the case. There's also another author who works especially with women in conflict. And she basically has the same message, that there's other tools we could use. And she actually has taken a lot of criticism because of that, because she's just providing tools that people can use to better relationships. Well, it seems like it's so foreign almost. People are like, well, that's really weird. I hadn't thought about. Not only had I not thought about that, but you don't see it modeled so often, and it's something to dig into and examine.
Wow. How important is it to love ourselves? We touched on that earlier. That takes self-care to the ultimate level. Because if we can't love ourselves, how do we love other people?
That's so true. And I think people find this, I have found this, as I have loved myself more and got clarity around my value, then I could see and value other people and love them more. And it seemed like to love myself first, that had to come first. And I feel like, so especially in a situation where there's conflict, such as divorce, there's a lot of tension and anger and frustration, and there's lack of love, there's lack of cohesiveness. So what if somebody doesn't love me? That's painful, and it's true. But then, and I'm kind of asking this too, so there's the opportunity for the change when we can love ourselves. I can love myself. It sounds kind of strange, but I can love myself and gain forward motion. Because of that, I can love other people more.
So it's almost like the goal. The goal is forward motion. You don't develop when you have static being. You want to be moving forward all the time, basically.
Yes. So I'm kind of asking this too, like another thing that I find so helpful for myself, and I just try to reach out to people about that, is that term to be trauma informed. And I feel like that's something that can also help us with seeing our value, but connecting with other people.
So and what is trauma informed?
Yeah. So this, I'm kind of green on this actually, but that term trauma informed showed up about 10 years ago in the psychiatric arena and really brought some important change to that field and to people. So I read this book that was written by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry, and the title of it was what happened to you. And that message, what happened to you, is what changed everything, because before, people were apt to ask, what's wrong with you? What is wrong with you? Why are you doing that? But that's the wrong question. The right question, Oprah said this, the right question is what happened to you. And when you take like a deep dive in that subconscious level, the things that happened to us maybe in our youth or childhood that are so responsible for our behavior right now. And I think a lot of people in conflict are in conflict and they don't know why. Like I think of myself as a younger person, I struggled with frustration and anger, just like it was in me, and I didn't know how to adjust it or change it or approach it or who to ask, because I felt like I was the one responsible for solving all this problem. Well, like we were talking about earlier, when I could get out of that box, so to speak, and reach out to other people for help, it made such a huge difference. And then I was able to communicate differently and just kind of be more self-aware of some of the thoughts and behaviors that I just used automatically, just because they were in me by nature, or I seen them modeled, And that was so to answer the question about that trauma informed, is just it just really means to be informed and understand how trauma affects what we're doing right now today. And I find for myself, like when I started to be aware of how trauma's imprint on my life and made me like, wow, do I really do that because of those things? It helped me to see people different too, and to have a
Almost
greater
like
love.
Moments.
Yeah. Where you could see, oh, well, maybe that's why they're defensive or aggressive, is something that's happened that they're completely unaware of.
So we got a guy, let's say over 40, just start or right in the middle of his divorce trauma journey. What are some of the points that you can point out to that person and say, hey, look at this, look at that? What would you say to that person if they came to you and said, hey, I'm in the middle of a crap storm and I need help? What's some of the things you could say?
I would say right off the bat that there is hope, wherever you're at and whatever that situation is. Do not lose your focus on hope, and to be aware, self-aware, and back to the value thing. Hey, let's sit down. I appreciate you. I love you, and this thing's going to get better. And lean on people to help you. And let's sit down and have a conversation about where you see your value, because it's your 10, and don't lose focus on that.
Wow. That is awesome. Let's talk about your book before we go. Let's inform your readers about your book, and I'll have the link down the bottom of the podcast. And how about your book? Tell us how that came about and go from there.
Okay. Well, that did come about because I just, there's something in me, and as there is a lot of people that just want to help and do something for people because we see suffering. And I was just inspired by, really, like we mentioned, children, and the idea of a person starting out in this world having tremendous value. And when does that change? It doesn't change. And the message too, I hear from people that suffer trauma, they're abused, or they're having a tough go in life, is that the common denominator I found was that people struggle with their value. The message has come to them through abuse or whatever, that they're dirt. They're not worth anything. And my mission, as yours is too, is to counter that. Hey, you have a right. It's okay for you to take up space on the planet, and just helping people through that. So in the book, I just go through little stories and things that have been aha moments for me because I didn't know what else to do. And it's not, I've said this, the book isn't, I'd probably do things a little bit different. It's not perfect, but I can't sit on the bench anymore and do nothing.
Yep.
And that's how I felt about
Coach.
that.
Put me in, Coach. I'll throw interception, but put me in.
Yes. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. And it's been a lot of great conversations with the people because, you talk about the weather and other things and lives and what's going on. But when you, I was a little bit shy about talking to people about their value and just having a conversation. Hey, how are you feeling? But it's opened up so much, and people think a lot deeper than we often give them credit for. And I've just found that to be really true.
That was intense. That was a lot, man. You gave me a lot to think about myself.
Oh man, well, hey,
and I consider myself healed.
I'm right with you, man.
3 boxes, and thanks a lot. You got to get a bunch of boxes now. Thanks a lot, man.
Well, hey, man, I love what you're doing because I was kind of curious how you picked out people over 40. Because it seems like that's a time in life when you're maybe you're frustrated, but you're ready to become more of service and aware. And hey, hey, it's steep and it's a struggle, but I want to get through this, and I don't know what to do. And when I come across people like you, here's a resource. We're right here, man. We got your back, and I think that's so much what people need.
Usually, people over 40, they have kids. They got the 401k. I mean, it's just a crap show. I mean, it's just, I've heard horror stories. And my story, I got divorced 50 and it was horrible. And I just want to be there for those guys. And then Rachel's going to reach out to the women over 40 soon. So we're going to be splitting, but still keeping our other podcasts. So we just want to help some people. And like I said, if we can help one, then so be it. I've done my job. So
that is awesome. That's so where it's at.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for listening. We will have his book linked down at the bottom, plus his website, too. He has a couple things going on, so we'll have it down at the bottom. But thanks for listening. Have a nice night. Bye-bye.